The word need is relative. For example, the Thai language doesn't have uppercase and lowercase. Thai also doesn't have verb tenses and doesn't put spaces between words. Do you need any of these? No, but they sure do help. Some languages you don't write vowels because the brain can figure it out. THTWLDBPRTTWLDTHVNWRTTNVWLS. Edit. After researching further, it seems like those writing systems omit some vowels that are spoken. Experts in those languages say it does make them harder to read, especially for beginners, but by now everyday readers are so used to them being missing that there is little serious effort to add them into everyday writing. I believe it's the difference between helping your uncle jack off a horse and helping your uncle jack off a horse. More variation allows for broader and more clear communication. You just changed my opinion. We don't need them, considering most languages used worldwide don't have that concept at all. However, the writing style of Latin, and a few other language families, evolved to make that distinction, and so here we are. Happened during the Carolingian Renaissance, to be specific. You're right, it's not necessary, and not all writing systems have anything like it. Having two different cases does sometimes help add extra context to writing though. It makes the beginning of sentences a bit more clearly visible, even though the dot before it already told us we're on to the next sentence. It can help clue us into if a word is a name, or an abbreviation. And we can get creative with it too. We can tell if someone is shouting, or we can repeat something another person said in a mocking way. It's useful, but it's not necessary. And to be clear, most of these uses have been invented after the fact. We have upper and lower case letters for historical reasons. But now that we have them, we've come up with a number of ways to make them useful for us. Original Latin where the letters come from doesn't either. Even spaces where optional at some point. Wow, this really is an explain like I'm five. In English we depend a lot on word order and rhythm. Seeing the beginning of a sentence as a larger, distinct letter makes it easier to parse a sentence at a glance. Proper nouns also help distinguish between states that are united, versus the United States. Just as an example. That's sort of like asking, greater than why do we need the letter C? Are K and S not sufficient? In both cases the answer is, you're right, we don't need that. But you need it to write things the traditional, correct, way, and it would be harder to change than keep doing. And as others have said, having upper and lower case actually provides more information and flexibility, so it has functional use too, more than C does. You need the letter C for chimichangas. Arabic letters have three forms, depending on whether it's first, middle, or end of the word. True, although that's a little different from upper, lower case because there's no semantic meaning attached to the form of the letters. A capital letter in English indicates the start of a new sentence, a proper noun, or shouting, amongst other things. In Arabic it's only about where in the word the letter comes, nothing else. How else would you know when I'm yelling? Or when Jack used his jack? Or when Jack used jack? Or when people are being condescending? The different capital and lower letters date back hundreds upon hundreds of years, and exist as a tool to help you determine when words are names of specific things, and as a help to identify when clauses start and end with respect to punctuation. The name casing itself comes from when we used to use stamps to print letters on paper, and typographers used to have two cases, one for capital dies and one for lower dies. Character casing is also useful for emphasis in exclamations, sounds, etc. In the software world, most programming languages make use of upper and lowercase letters to convey meaning in a standard way too. Like, for example, Java, public final class app, public static void main, string, args, system.out, print lane, hello, world. Private app, throw new unsupported operation exception. TL. Dr upper and lowercase letters make languages, both spoken, written and programming, easier to understand and act as a medium for conveying details about how the words are expected to be used. Not in SQL. Use of case varies by language, some more, some less, some not at all. And other uses like we see on the internet arise from time to communicate beyond just the words on the page. In this last scenario we can add things like different fonts, typefaces, italics, bold, etc. Need is relative. The concept evolved because of needs back in the day, but those needs and demands change over time. Today we retain the concepts but put them to many different uses well beyond their original intended purpose as our needs have demanded. This was a great reply, thank you. I was just curious I guess, and this has opened a new track for my train of thought. Respect. Just be like the Romans, all uppercase and no spaces. STVLTVMESTTIMEREQVODVITARENOTPOTES. Stultum est temere quod vitare non potes. It's foolish to fear what you're unable to change. Publilius Servus. Most of the time we don't really need them. But we have them because we have had them historically, and it's hard to change that. Here are a couple uses where capitalizing makes things less ambiguous. When someone's name is also a word. For example, names like Liberty or Will. Capitalizing them makes it more clear you are talking about a person instead of the word's other meaning. In computer science, often variables have names that use a scheme called camel case. Variable names must not have spaces in them, but often you want multiple words. So you just capitalize a letter instead of using a space to show it's a new word. For example, ID to score map is easier to read than ID to score map. You don't need them. Hebrew and Arabic don't have them. Korean doesn't have them. None of the Chinese and Japanese writing systems have them. They have their uses, but you don't need them to have a functioning written language. Indian languages don't either. Because, did you get it? Happy crying face. We need uppercase in certain places to act as little signposts to help us understand written language more accurately. Uppercase makes the flow of reading easier, and in some languages differentiates verbs and adjectives from nouns. Sometimes it's the only difference. How are you going to create an impenetrable password without at least one uppercase and one lowercase letter? It's a practical solution. Our alphabet originated from Romans. On the beginning they didn't had lowercase, punctuation or spaces. Memorizing a speech was extremely difficult for politics and senators. That was where spaces, commas and periods came to help. Lowercase came around 5th century because back then there was no printing and manual copies were more fast to write and more readable in lowercase. We need uppercase letters because there's a big difference between helping your Uncle Jack off a horse and helping your Uncle Jack off a horse. To make things clear, to make things clear, to make things clear, which one is easy to read? This is not a relevant defense for capitalization, though. The only reason is easier for one to read is because of the reader being taught to mind capitalization. You cannot defend a stance with the stance. You don't. You can do whatever you want with case, and still be understood. In my job as a teleprompter operator, I have to put text on a screen for people to read on the fly. Most of them find it a lot easier to read upper, lower than all caps. I ask them, and I've been told over and over that it's easier for them. Sometimes people have no preference. I'm sure people can get used to anything. Expression. Because we as a society need a difference between, I got a 36% on my test, in all capitals as maybe a kid who's not good at school and good for them. Or for a smart kid to say to his parents say, I got a 36% on my test. Making things louder or quieter help a lot for context like in books and stuff. Interesting little side note on where the terms upper and lower case originate. Individual pieces of metal type were kept in boxes called cases. The smaller letters, which were used most often, were kept in a lower case that was easier to reach. Capital letters, which were used less frequently, were kept in an uppercase. Because of this old storage convention, we still refer to small letters as lowercase and capital letters as uppercase. https://www.wonderopolis.org/wonder/y-their-uppercase- and lowercase letters. But how will the nouns know they're important? Rolling on the floor laughing. We don't need both, but it's like punctuation. It helps clarify the meaning of a written statement without having to change the words used. Lots of languages get along just fine without. All caps is not great from an accessibility perspective, for both sighted users and those using assistive technology. Upper and lower helps communicate information. In conjunction with period, it denotes a stop. It denotes a formal name or title. When speaking, we have nonverbal cues to help us figure out what the meaning is, or can note confusion and add more information. Mostly etiquette from old times, but it helps at reading. You know when the paragraph starts what are import names and other things. This is important for kids to learn how to read and write fast. It also helps them in assimilation and understanding.